Have an amazing Tuesday, Black and Gold Nation. But something big is brewing behind the scenes with the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you've been paying close attention to how this front office has moved over the past year, you can tell this isn't just about finding a quarterback right now. It's way more strategic, way more calculated than that. There's a bigger plan in motion, and not everyone is seeing it yet. Think about this for a second. The Steelers didn't just stumble into having extra draft capital. They actively built it. They allowed players to walk in free agency to stack compensatory picks, and even made moves like trading George Pickens primarily to gain future draft flexibility. That's not accidental. That's a front office trying to create options, especially at the quarterback position. But here's where things get interesting. The plan didn't exactly meet reality. The expectation was that this draft class would give them a better shot at landing a true franchise quarterback. Instead, they found themselves in a situation where there may not even be a quarterback worth taking where they're picking, and that completely changes the conversation, because now it's not just about when do you take your guy, it's about whether that guy even exists in this class, and that's not just a Steelers problem. Around the league, teams are struggling with the exact same issue. Over the last several drafts, how many quarterbacks have truly become undeniable stars? Very few. You can go year by year and see it. Classes with 1 or 2 first-round QBs, others with more hype but mixed results. The reality is, finding a franchise quarterback isn't just about positioning. Sometimes it comes down to timing and luck. That puts the Steelers in a tough but fascinating spot. Because on one hand, you have a fan base, and even people inside the building are thinking about the future. There's a real argument to be made for continuing to stack picks, maybe even pushing more assets into next year, hoping that a better quarterback class emerges. The idea being build up enough ammunition so when the right guy appears, you can go get him no matter where he is. But on the other hand, there's a very real limitation to that strategy. If everyone in the league is thinking the same thing, and right now it feels like they are, then who exactly is trading back? If 25 or 30 teams are trying to stockpile future picks, the market dries up. There are more buyers than sellers, and suddenly this perfect plan becomes much harder to execute. So what's the alternative? It might actually be simpler than people think. Dominate this draft without forcing the quarterback pick. Because despite the concerns at QB, this class has depth at multiple positions. Wide receiver, defensive back, offensive line, there's real talent there. The Steelers could walk away with several players who contribute immediately, filling key holes across the roster. And if you build your team the right way, you don't need 5 or 6 pieces next year. You might only need 1. That's when trading up becomes realistic. Instead of trying to force a long-term plan that depends on uncertain future classes, you create a strong foundation now. Then when the right quarterback presents itself, whether he falls or you identify him early, you have the flexibility to go get him without gutting your team. And that's where this whole strategy becomes really intriguing, because it's not just about patience, it's about positioning yourself to strike at the exact right moment. We've seen it happen before. Teams like the Chiefs and Bills didn't just wait around. They identified their guy and paid the price to move up. And sometimes that's what it takes. Not endless planning, but decisive action when the opportunity finally appears. So now the question shifts from why didn't the Steelers take a quarterback to something much bigger. Are they actually setting themselves up for the right moment, or are they risking missing it altogether? And that's where everything starts to come into focus, because once you accept that the Steelers may not force a quarterback pick this year, the entire strategy shifts from reaction to control. If they walk out of this draft with 4 or 5 players who can actually contribute early, a wide receiver who can make plays alongside DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr., a defensive back who adds toughness to the secondary, maybe a guard who stabilizes the offensive line, suddenly this roster looks very different. Not perfect, but balanced. And balance is what gives you leverage in the NFL. Because here's the truth that not everyone wants to admit, you don't need a perfect roster to go get a quarterback. You just need a stable one. Right now, one of the biggest risks for any team drafting a quarterback is throwing him into a situation where everything else is broken. We've seen talented prospects fail, not because they weren't good enough, but because the structure around them wasn't ready. The Steelers seemed determined not to fall into that trap again. So instead of chasing a name in a weak class, they're quietly building something that can support a quarterback when the time comes. And there's another layer to this that makes it even more interesting: flexibility inside the draft itself. With a large number of picks, the Steelers don't have to sit still. They can move up in the second round to grab a player they really like before he's gone. They can package late round picks to jump ahead of other teams targeting the same position. They can be aggressive, not recklessly but strategically, without sacrificing future drafts. That's a big deal, because while some fans are focused entirely on next year, the front office might be thinking, what if the key move isn't next year, but how we position ourselves right now to make that move possible? And when you zoom out even further, you start to see how this connects to the bigger picture of where the Steelers are as a franchise. There was even a comparison brought up recently to the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that had a strong defensive identity, made a coaching shift, and suddenly broke through to win a Super Bowl. On the surface, you can understand why people see similarities. A defensive core, an offense trying to find new life, a sense that maybe they're just one spark away. But if we're being real, this Steelers team isn't there yet. That Buccaneers defense was already dominant before they made their leap. The Steelers' defense, as it stands today, still has questions. Players like TJ Watt, Patrick Queen, and Jalen Ramsey are expected to perform at a high level, but last season didn't consistently reflect that dominance. And that matters, because if you're going to follow that kind of blueprint, your defense has to be elite, not just good. At the same time, the offense could be trending upward. If the Steelers hit on a receiver early, if the offensive line takes a step forward, and if the scheme under a more offensive-minded approach starts to unlock playmakers, this team could become more dangerous than people expect. Not necessarily a Super Bowl favorite overnight, but definitely more complete than what we've seen in recent years. And that's really the key word here: complete, because completeness is what allows a team to take risks at the right time. It's what allows you to say, we're one move away, and actually mean it. Without that, every decision becomes desperation. With it, decisions become calculated. So when you look at everything the Steelers have done, stockpiling picks, staying disciplined at quarterback, focusing on depth and flexibility, it starts to feel less like hesitation and more like preparation. Preparation for a moment that hasn't arrived yet, but that they fully expect will. And when that moment comes, whether it's a quarterback falling in the draft, a trade opportunity, or even a bold move no one sees coming, they want to be ready to act without second guessing. That's the gamble. Not just waiting, but waiting with purpose. So now it comes down to this: if the Steelers stay patient, build the roster the right way, and strike when the opportunity appears, are we watching the early stages of something that could finally solve the quarterback situation long term? Or are they overthinking a problem that demands urgency right now? And there's one more layer to this that hasn't been talked about enough. What happens if the opportunity shows up earlier than expected? Because while everyone is focused on next year as the potential quarterback solution, the NFL doesn't always follow timelines. Every draft has surprises. Every year, a player slides further than anyone predicted. And every year, there's at least one team that wasn't supposed to make a move, but suddenly does. If the Steelers truly believe in their preparation, then they don't need to lock themselves into one path. They can build the roster now, stay flexible, and if a quarterback they value starts slipping into a range where a trade becomes realistic, they're one of the few teams that would actually be equipped to make that jump without completely sacrificing their future. That's the difference between planning and positioning. Planning says, we'll wait until next year no matter what. Positioning says, we'll be ready whenever the moment comes. And right now, everything the Steelers have done points much more toward positioning. It also explains why they didn't panic at the trade deadline, why they didn't overpay for short-term fixes, and why they've been so deliberate with how they've managed their draft capital. They're not just thinking about filling holes, they're thinking about preserving freedom. Because once you commit too early, especially at quarterback, you lose that freedom. And maybe that's the biggest lesson here. The Steelers aren't ignoring the quarterback problem. They're refusing to solve it the wrong way. They've already seen what happens when you reach for a solution just because you feel pressure to have one. It might stabilize things for a moment, but it doesn't guarantee long-term success. And in today's NFL, if you don't get the quarterback position right, everything else becomes harder. So instead of forcing it, they're building toward it. Now the real tension comes from how long you can afford to do that, because fans want answers. They want direction. They want to feel like the team is one clear step away, and patience only works if it eventually leads to something real. If this approach doesn't produce that franchise quarterback, then all of this careful planning will start to look like hesitation in hindsight. But if it does, if they hit on this draft, strengthen the roster, and then make the right move at the right time, whether it's next year or sooner, then everything we're seeing right now will make perfect sense. And it won't look like they were behind the rest of the league. It'll look like they were waiting for the exact moment to pass everyone. That's what makes this so fascinating. Because we're not just watching a draft strategy unfold, we're watching a front office try to thread the needle between patience and urgency at the most important position in football. And that's exactly why this moment feels bigger than just one draft. Because what the Steelers decide to do from here isn't just about adding talent. It's about defining their identity moving forward. Are they a team that continues to rely on stability, depth, and consistency, hoping that eventually the right quarterback falls into their lap? Or are they quietly preparing to become aggressive at the exact moment when it matters most? Because make no mistake, those are two very different paths. One keeps you competitive, the other has the potential to change everything. And if you really read between the lines of everything we've talked about, the extra picks, the patience at quarterback, the focus on building out the roster instead of forcing a move, it feels like the Steelers are leaning toward that second path. Not reckless aggression, but calculated boldness when the opportunity is undeniable. That's how teams change their trajectory in this league. Not by chasing every option, but by identifying the right one and committing fully when it appears. So as this draft unfolds and as we start to see how the board falls, don't just focus on who the Steelers pick. Pay attention to how they move. Do they trade up in key spots? Do they maximize value across multiple rounds? Do they walk away with a roster that feels deeper, stronger, and more complete than it did before? Because if they do, then this first step of the plan is working exactly as intended. And if that happens, then all eyes immediately shift to what comes next. The quarterback conversation doesn't go away. It just becomes more intense, more focused, more deliberate. Because at that point, the Steelers won't just be looking for any answer. They'll be looking for their answer, the one move that ties everything together. And when that moment finally arrives, whether it's a trade up the board, a bold move in the draft, or even an unexpected opportunity that no one sees coming, the preparation we're seeing right now will determine whether they're ready to take it. That's the part that should have every Steelers fan paying attention, because this isn't just about what happens today, it's about whether the foundation being built right now is strong enough to support the move that defines tomorrow.